Hey guys, so today I am going to walk you through how to use some of your curvy scraps. So whenever you sew curves, they create a lot of waste fabric, and sometimes those scraps can be a little bit difficult to know what to do with. So I am just going to walk you through a really simple way to make use of them without wasting your fabric. So all you need is some sort of pencil to mark your circles and the cuts that you're going to make. You can either use a pencil like this or even just a regular like lead pencil is perfectly fine. So I'm going to start with this one right here. So I'm just going to make little marks, you can barely see them, all the way around this circle. Okay, let me show you. So this is kind of an irregular piece. It's not the most natural shape to use. So instead of keeping it as is, I'm going to just mark a curve that would be a little bit easier to work with. So I can trim it, and I'm gonna go up to the corner because, and I'll do the same with this one. We'll trim it up to the corner because making these kind of right angle seams is a little more challenging than you may want to do for an improv. And in saying that, improv is a great way to describe this. I'm gonna take my scissors. And I don't know if you can see these like very faint white lines. I'm just gonna take it and trim. So I was saying improv is a good way to describe these because there's not a perfect way of doing them. You're just kind of working with the pieces that you have, which I feel like is a cool way of even remembering kind of the origins of quilting, because that's what people did once upon a time. They worked with the scraps that they had and just put them together in any which way without feeling like, oh, there's only one right way of doing this. Okay, let's just start with those two. I'm gonna take these ones off. Okay, so you guys might not be able to see super well, but I have these white marks that have marked the circular shape that I had previously. So with all circles, I'm just gonna make them a little bit darker so hopefully y'all can see them. With circles, you need a 1 inch difference in the radius, diameter. 1 inch difference in the diameter, or a 1/2 inch difference in the radius. So I'm gonna take my ruler and just mark a 1/2 inch inside these previous marks that I made. And that's where I'm going to cut. And honestly, half the time I just eyeball it. I've seen a lot going around about just the importance of sustainable quilting and how the quilting industry creates a lot of waste. And I do think that's so true. And these curvy scraps specifically, okay, so this one you're gonna make 1/2 inch outside because you need, that would essentially be the radius measurement, would be kind of like right here, 1/2 inch. You need a 1/2 inch overlap in your cuts. But as I was saying, sustainability, the quilting industry does create a lot of waste, and these curvy circular scraps, the quilts are just beautiful, but it does make more waste than the average half square triangle quilt does. And I just think it would be good for us to begin learning how to make good use of these scraps that we have. Okay, so here we go. So I'm folding it in half. I just really hope y'all can see. That's where my inner circle is going to be. So I'm just taking my scissors and trimming accordingly. I would say err on the side of going too small rather than going too large. If you feel like you've gone too small and your circle is not fitting well, you can always go back and trim it a little bit bigger, but you can't make it smaller. Okay. So I went a little bit small on that, and I'm gonna open it up just a little bit more. When you get the puckering in your circle, in your inset circle, if you're sewing one, that is from having this piece being too large for the circle that is inset. So basically you have too much fabric on the outside because your circle is too big, and so it ends up puckering and having to fold over to accommodate the smallness of this circle. So that's why it's better, your fabric has stretch to it, and it is much better to stretch a little bit and pull it to where it needs to be, do a little bit more, than it is to have to have a bunch of puckers and creases in it, in my opinion. In the shapes that are, see, this is, I'm just walking you guys through exactly the process that I do, because I think it's important to show that it's not a foolproof or like super specific process. Okay, so here's this shape where it's gonna go. I cut in 1/2 inch. You have more wiggle room with these type of pieces. They don't have to be quite as accurate as an inset circle does, because you can just trim and square up your piece and it honestly doesn't really matter if it falls perfectly where it needs to go. So that's where it's going to be. This one you will get kind of that right angle seam, but I like the shape of this and so I wanted to keep it. Okay, I'm going to show you how I pin it. This one. For these type of seams, I don't know if I do them perfectly correctly, but I sew one at a time. So I'll sew my curve and just let it fall where it's supposed to. And then I'll come back in and sew that vertical seam afterwards. That's the way that I personally do it. If it was me, I would not pin both of these at once, but I'm actually going to take this one out and show you how to pin the inset circle. And then once they are sewn, I will show you how it looks. Okay, so crease, crease. I have another video on sewing inset circles that I think would probably be helpful for you to watch, because I'm just going to kind of do this one quickly. But the most important thing, let's see how that looks. Close enough. I think one of the reasons I love improv piecing is, like I said earlier, that I feel like it just reminds me of what the quilters of the past would have done when it was just a circle of women sitting there sewing their quilts that were needed for beds or for traveling or for people that they were sending them to. And it was just, how can I use these old shirts with holes in them? How can I use these pants that don't fit anymore? How can I use this sheet that is now threadbare? Like, use the portions that I have. And that's what they did. And there weren't the rules, there weren't the patterns, there weren't the only one way to do it. Okay, so this is my pinned inset circle. I'm going to sew this. I'm going to sew this one next and show you how we make progress on it. Okay, so here we have the finished piece. I'll trim that up right there, square that up a little bit more right here, but you can see where the outline was that I marked. And you can see how that corner kind of came together, the back all pressed, not super perfect, but I really like the way it's turning out. And then as I continue to improv these pieces, I might put something right here. I might put this color right here. Can put like a line of these ones at the top. And that is how I continue to use up the scraps that I have instead of wasting them like these curved pieces. I'm gonna do one more as an example. Take these ones out. So this one, I'm gonna be starting with this big curve that I have. And I don't have anything to put inside of it, and I don't really wanna make something big enough to go around it because then I would just be cutting something out and having another bit of waste. So instead I've grabbed these few pieces and I am going to maybe like this or so piece together something that I want to put inside. And remember, it's gonna have to, I can cut this to whatever I want it to be, and then I'll have that small inner curve of the dark green to use somewhere else. So I'm going to say that I want this piece. I'll just attach it on the end right there. So I'm gonna mark right here. Take my scissors, cut across. That one's gonna go right there. Then say I want this piece to go right here-ish. I'm gonna mark right here, right here, right here. And I am literally just improvising this as I do it, because as I video it, because this is how I do it when I am creating an interesting improv piece that uses up all my scraps, but is just a little something fun. Okay, so I'm actually gonna cut off this piece, and got that right there. I'm gonna have it sewn, got my 1/4 inch overlap right here, and say we need to have it this width. So right here, right about, oh, can you all see that? Let me bring it back in here. So I have my 1/4 inch overlap. What my 1/4 inch overlap is going to be right here. My 1/4 inch seam allowance gives me about the piece that I'm going to need to cut right there. So a lot of times I'll kind of pin as I go to help me remember what pieces I'm going to put where. So pin this to this one. Okay, so let's see about what size that is. That looks like a pretty good size. Once it's all sewn together, I can cut out kind of an arc shape and attach it to this. So I'm going to pin this right here so that I know where I want it. And I'm going to go sew it. Okay, so I am back with my finished piece, and I ended up adding an extra piece at the top just because I wanted plenty of space to work with for it. Okay, so if I was going to cut this into a curve to inset inside of this, I'm going to start down here at the corner. Now with the curve, let's see, might not start quite that low, so this is about 7, maybe a 7 1/4 inches. So I want probably at least an inch. We'll go with 6 inches is how long I want it to be. So cut off some of my bottom, mark up here on my top. And the thing about piecing curves improv is they don't have to be symmetrical per se, they just have to be symmetrical to each other. So this is 6 inches. That doesn't mean that because if I was making a complete circle, it would be 6 plus 6, so the diameter would be 12. That's not going to be the case with this one because I don't have that much space. But as long as my measurements are proportional in what I cut out, it's going to work. So I'm going to have this be my bottom. Let's see, I'll mark right here. That's 4 3/4. We'll go with 4 1/2. 4 1/2. And then just kind of mark it as it goes up. The goal of this improv piecing is not to be perfect, it's just to use up whatever fabric you happen to have. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut this. I like to use scissors instead of a rotary cutter whenever I am doing improv piecing because a rotary cutter makes me feel like I need to use a ruler, and I don't really want to feel like I'm measuring what I'm doing. I kind of just want to feel like I'm freehanding it. Obviously there's lots of patterns where the beauty comes in when you follow the instructions specifically and get exactly what you're looking for in the final product. And I just think those ones are just lovely. Some of the really intricately pieced quilts where it's a very exact science. But sometimes it's fun to get a little freedom from the precision that I think sometimes us quilters can fall into sort of a perfectionism, and to just let the fabric do what it's gonna do. So I probably didn't need to add that piece at the top, but it's there. So, okay, so now I'm gonna mark around this piece. And if you remember from earlier, we're gonna move 1/2 inch in when and it's not to say I do keep a ruler around a little bit because you have to follow some guidelines just because you want to be able to have seams that you know aren't just going to like fall apart on you, but it's still fun to make it a little flexible. Okay, take my scissors. And remember, like I said earlier, err on the side of a smaller outer circle than larger, because even though this is a half circle, you can fix it, but it's just nice to have some room to work with and to trim things, in my opinion. Okay, so this is, I will show you when I've sewn it together. This is basically what it's gonna look like. And I might square it up. I might square it up and then add a piece up here. I don't know, we'll just see how it comes together. I'll show you when it's sewn. Okay, so here you have the finished piece. You can just take your little pencil and come through, and this is a fabric specific pencil, but just kind of erase off these marks. They'll wash out regardless. And then the options with this are just the same as before, pretty much limitless. I could take some pieces like this and turn it into kind of something like that. I could use these to create what would be something that would frame this, and you could have basically this circle, inset in this one, inset in a background square. I could just square this up and use it as a more uniform piece. The thing is, there's no right way to do it. There's also no wrong way to do it. And you just get to let your creative juices flow and create some, there's just some beauty in creating something that can only ever be made once, that you're not gonna make it again because you couldn't even if you tried. So yeah, thanks for sticking around with me.